The grand ballroom of the Halcyon Regent Hotel was a constellation of manufactured stars, a glass ceiling reflecting the real explosions of fireworks over the Port Garrison harbor. It was a room built on illusion, and tonight, Adrian Lucenti was its chief illusionist. He stood at the head of the long table, a man carved from the same granite as the city's docks, raising a champagne flute. The light caught the cuff of his bespoke suit, but his eyes were entirely on the woman beside him. "To Serafina," he said, his voice a low vibration that commanded silence even from the clinking glasses. Serafina Cade, his fiancée, a woman whose Jewish-Haitian heritage gave her an impossible, breathtaking beauty, smiled. She was a philanthropist, the respectable face he was purchasing to legitimize his logistics empire. The light made the diamonds at her throat seem cold. At the edge of the room, blending into the shadows cast by a faux Corinthian column, Tess Calder watched. She was a server, invisible in her black uniform, but her gaze was sharp. This was her third job of the day, the one that paid for the tiny apartment she shared with her daughter. Her focus was not on the Mafia boss, but on the children's area set up in an alcove near the stage. Her daughter, Nora, sat there. At 11 years old, Nora had a stillness that unnerved adults. She wasn't playing with the other children from the youth ballet troupe who were scheduled to perform. She was watching the room with an analyst's intensity. Her gaze wasn't on the glittering couple or the fireworks. It was fixed on the sound tech table. Tess had seen Nora do this before, finding the one thing in a room that was out of place. Nora watched as two men in hotel staff blazers huddled over the audio mixer. They weren't the regular crew. One man passed an earpiece to the other. The second man tapped the main podium microphone, his lips moving silently, counting the rhythm 1-2. Then, with practiced ease, he slotted a small, dense black device into the microphone's base, hidden from the room by a decorative flange. At the main table, Adrian Lucenti leaned toward Serafina, his public toast finished. Moving in for the private clink of glasses, the gesture was intimate, proprietary. As he moved, the ballroom lights began to dim and the orchestra's volume softened, cueing the next phase of the gala. That's when Tess saw it, a pinprick of red light, sharp and digital, sweeping across the base of the lectern where Adrian had just been standing. It was gone in a second, but she had seen it. Her eyes snapped up, following the imagined trajectory. Across the room, nestled in a decorative scaffold, was a camera. It looked like part of the event to live feed setup, but it was too rigid, its lens too dark. It was pointing not at the podium, but at the exact spot where a man's heart would be. Time seemed to slow. The music was a dull throb. Tess felt a cold dread, a mother's instinct screaming that the pieces were wrong. Before Tess could even process the thought, Nora was moving. She slipped from the children's area, a small ghost in a party dress, weaving through the forest of chairs. She didn't run. She walked with purpose, stopping just short of the VIP table's velvet rope. She was only a few feet from Adrian. He was still smiling at Serafina, his glass raised. Nora did not call out. She just looked at him, her face pale and serious. She caught his eye. Adrian, a man who survived by reading threats in fractions of seconds, saw her. He saw the urgency, the lack of fear, the pure information in her gaze. Nora's lips formed the words, mouthed with perfect silent clarity. "Count to 3 and run." Adrian Lucenti's smile did not falter, but the life in his eyes went flat. He held the pose, his glass suspended, but his entire being had snapped to attention. His gaze locked with the 11-year-old girls. He saw her, really saw her. On the massive LED screens flanking the stage, the logo of the Port Garrison Philanthropic Fund flickered and was replaced. A new emblem burned onto the screens, an eagle clutching a schematic of a city grid. Below it, the words Urban Hazard Task Group, UHTG. It sounded real. It sounded federal. And it was flashing, a rhythmic pulse, a signal that this scene was now under new management. Tess lunged. Her server's tray clattered to the floor, but she didn't care. She lunged for the VIP table, not at Adrian, but at the heavy damask tablecloth. She grabbed the fabric, yanking it with all her strength. The cloth, weighted with silver and crystal, ripped free, covering the base of the nearby lectern and the laser's target in a heap of white linen. It happened in a single, fluid motion. Adrian, seeing Tess's desperate act, did not panic. He simply adapted. He raised his glass as if finishing the toast, his body coiling. He ducked his head slightly, a gesture of humility to his fiancée, and he counted, silently. 1, 2, 3. He didn't run. He acted. His hand, the one not holding the champagne, shot out and grabbed the microphone cord from the lectern. He yanked. The cord ripped from the base, taking the small black device with it, severing the connection just as the UHTG logo on the screen pulsed a brighter, final white. The main service doors burst open, not with commandos, but with a tidal wave of thick, white smoke. Someone had cranked the event's fog machines to maximum, flooding the room in an instant, blinding, choking. Pandemonium. Through the chaos, Adrian moved. He dropped his glass, grabbed Nora's small hand, and kneed the table, upending it to create a barrier. He locked eyes with Tess through the swirling fog and jerked his head. Follow. A dull, heavy thump came from above. It wasn't a bomb, it was a concussion. A silent, pressurized explosion. The magnificent glass ceiling shuddered. Shards of safety glass, heavy as ice, rained down on the tables. It wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to create terror, to frame a narrative. In that split second, Tess saw Serafina Cade. Her face was marble, her eyes frozen. She knew. She had known something. But as Tess scrambled past, brushing against the VIP table, Serafina's hand darted out. It looked like a stumble, an accident. Her hand brushed Tess's uniform pocket. Tess felt a tiny, hard object pressed against her hip, a micro-movement, a whisper of contact. Serafina's hand was gone as quickly as it appeared, her face a mask of elegant shock, as if she had never moved at all. The air in the loading bay was cold, sharp with the smell of diesel, wet cardboard, and the metallic tang of the harbor. Adrian moved through it like he owned the concrete, his hand a firm, grounding pressure on Nora's shoulder. Tess scrambled behind, her server's apron still on, her breath catching in her lungs. She could still hear the faint, muffled screams from the ballroom, an echo of the chaos they had fled. A black sedan, a Vesper, sat idling, its lines hard and anonymous in the yellow light of a single bulkhead lamp. It was a block of polished obsidian in the grime. The driver's door opened, and a man named Rook emerged. He was built like a shipping container, solid and square, and he moved with a disturbing lack of sound. He did not ask questions. He simply opened the rear passenger door, his eyes scanning the alley. As Nora passed, Rook took off his own heavy wool coat and, in one practiced motion, draped it over her small shoulders. The coat enveloped her, smelling of leather and engine oil. Nora burrowed into it, and for the first time, Tess saw her shiver. "Get in," Adrian commanded, his voice scraping raw. The doors shut with the heavy, satisfying thunk of armored plating. The inside of the Vesper was silent, a tomb insulated from the city. They pulled away from the Halcyon Regent, the tires barely whispering on the wet pavement. Tess's heart was a hammer against her ribs, but her mind was fiercely clear. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, practical dread. She looked at the man beside her, this stranger who had nearly been assassinated in front of her. "What is UHTG?" she asked. Her voice was steady, too steady. Adrian was looking out the reinforced window, his profile a hard line against the passing city lights. "A ghost," he said, his voice flat. "A ghost created to clear the path." A phone buzzed in his breast pocket. He pulled it out. The screen illuminated his face, casting shadows in the hollows of his cheeks. Tess saw the sender, Serafina. The message was brutally short. "Doc Syndicate will blame you on Channel 9 at 10:15 p.m. Adrian clicked the phone off, plunging the cabin back into near darkness. 10:15 p.m. He checked his watch. They had less than 2 hours. The Harborline Lofts building was a monument of dark glass and repurposed steel, a fortress disguised as luxury. Adrian bypassed the main entrance, driving them into a private subterranean garage. They rode a silent elevator that opened directly into his penthouse. The apartment was vast and cold, with floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a panoramic, indifferent view of Port Garrison. Adrian moved immediately to the door. He didn't just lock it. He engaged what looked like a series of deadbolts, then placed his hand on a biometric panel. He swiped his thumb, not up or down, but in a complex, three-part pattern. A kinetic lock. It whirred, and Tess heard tumblers fall into place deep within the doorframe. Nora, still wrapped in Rook's enormous coat, walked on unsteady legs to the entryway. From her dress pocket, she pulled a small, worn, plush toy. It was a guardsman. Its red felt uniform faded. She carefully placed it on the marble floor, leaning it against the door jamb. A charm. Tess's throat tightened. Her daughter, who saw the world in patterns and threats, still needed a magical soldier to watch her back. Tess felt the tiny, hard square in her own pocket. Her fingers fumbled with the cheap fabric. "Serafina," she said, pulling out the micro SD card. "She gave this to me." In the confusion, Adrian took it without a word. He slotted it into a tablet, his movements economical. He didn't ask. He just acted. He hit play. The room filled with the sound of a recording, distorted and low, a man's voice, not Adrian's, not one she recognized. It was smooth, bureaucratic, and utterly terrifying. "You are a reasonable woman, Serafina. He's just a port operator. This is a matter of federal security." Then, Serafina's voice, strained. "My brother is not part of this. He's sick. Solace Ridge Detention Center takes excellent care of its patients," the voice replied, the politeness a threat. "As long as the paperwork is in order, and you will ensure it is, you will stand by Mr. Lucente, you will be the grieving fiancé, and you will point the finger where we tell you." The recording clicked off. Tess stared at the tablet. Solace Ridge. She had lived in Port Garrison for 5 years. She had never heard of it. "It doesn't exist," Adrian said, his mind already there. "Just like the UHTG. Nora, who had been listening from the doorway, spoke. Her voice was small but absolute. "The ship horn." Adrian looked at her. "What?" In the recording, behind his voice. "Listen." He rewound the file. He raised the volume. Beneath the man's threats, almost imperceptible, was a single, low-frequency tone, a ship horn, but not the usual harbor blast. It was one note, held for exactly 3 seconds, then a 2-second pause, then the same note again. "That's the horn from Seabright Pier," Nora said, her small face pale. "It only does that when the tide is high, to warn the dredge boats." Tess and Adrian looked at each other, the pieces slotted into place. Seabright Pier, the one part of the port Adrian didn't control. "A federal task force is fake to take me out," Adrian said, pacing the dark room. "They use Serafina to frame me, make it stick. The dock syndicate, my rivals, get the blame. But they don't get the port," Tess finished, understanding. "The UHTG does, the ghost. They seize the assets pending investigation. And transfer the contracts," Adrian concluded. "Specifically, the refrigerated container contracts. Money laundering, clean, cold, and untraceable." He stopped, turning to face Tess and Nora. The implications settled on them, heavy as the fog outside. They were civilians who had seen the mechanism. They were loose ends. "I can protect you," Adrian said. It was not a question. "I have a place. The Lucente family has protocols for this. Shadow protocol. You would be safe. You would disappear." Tess looked at Nora, who was watching her, her eyes wide but trusting. Disappear. It was what Tess had done to escape her ex-husband, to run again. But this was different. This wasn't running from something. This was running with a target. She thought of the men at the soundboard, the fake camera, the laser. "For Nora," Tess said, her voice a whisper. "We'll go." Adrian nodded once. He picked up his phone, but not the one from his pocket. He retrieved a different, older model device from a drawer. He dialed a number. "Kite," he said. "I need eyes. Everything you have on Seabright Pier, the Dock Syndicate, and a ghost called UHTG. Now." He listened. "I don't care what you heard. The feed on Channel 9 is a lie." He hung up. Kite. Not a person, Tess guessed, but a network. A street-level web of information, the kind that saw everything the official cameras missed. The penthouse was silent again. Save for the wind whistling against the glass, the darkness of the bay was absolute, pressing in. Tess went to the sofa, retrieved a cashmere throw blanket, and walked back to Nora. She wrapped it around her daughter, pulling her close. Nora leaned against her, her small body finally relaxing, her face pressed into Tess's side. Adrian stood by the window, a breath away, but he maintained the distance. He was a man of boundaries, of violence, and of a strange, rigid code. He was their protector, and he was the reason they were in danger. The air between them was electric with this fact, a space of 2 feet that felt like a mile. The silence of the penthouse was a living thing, a pressurized quiet that felt louder than the chaos they had fled. Nora was asleep on the vast sofa, still cocooned in Rook's coat, her small plush soldier standing guard beside her. Tess sat in an armchair, knees drawn up, watching the dark city. She couldn't rest. Every small sound in the unfamiliar, sterile space made her muscles tighten. She knew this feeling. It was the adrenaline of survival, the terrible, familiar hum of a life lived on the edge. Her mind drifted back, pulling her from the expensive leather and glass to the cracked linoleum of a bus station. She remembered stepping off that bus in Port Garrison 5 years ago, Nora's hand sweaty in hers, with exactly $47 and a crippling fear. She had left her ex-husband, a man whose presence was a looming storm cloud. She never spoke of the specifics, not even to herself. There was no need. The only thing that mattered was the decision, the clean break, the choice to be safe rather than be sorry. She had worked. Gods, how she had worked. 3 jobs, the 6 a.m. shift at the diner, the midday reset at a downtown hotel, and nights like this, serving champagne to men who didn't see her. All of it, every exhausting hour, had been to build a small, quiet life, a life where no one yelled and the doors stayed locked. And in one night, a Mafia boss's near miss had shattered that fragile peace. She looked at Adrian, who was standing by the windows, a dark silhouette against the city. He was not like her ex. His power was not the messy, desperate kind. It was cold, structural, and absolute. She knew the stories. Everyone in Port Garrison knew of the Lucentis. They said he had taken the family's business, a grubby, violent waterfront racket, and laundered it. He had turned rusty freighters and union skimming into a sleek, legal logistics empire. But the blood, they whispered, never washed off. The Dock Syndicate, the old guard he had displaced, still saw him as a target. Tonight had proved them right. And Serafina, the beautiful, doomed fiancée. Tess now understood the haunted look in her eyes. She wasn't a partner, she was a political prisoner, a trade. Her life for her brothers, a life held in a phantom detention center. A low buzz came from the tablet on the table. Rook, calling on a secure line. Adrian answered, his voice low. Report. Tess could only hear Adrian's sigh, his face hardened. How deep? A pause. Understood. Lock it down, go dark. He ended the call, his jaw tight. Rook's update, he said, turning to Tess. The UHTG signal. It wasn't just in the ballroom. It was patched directly into the city's main camera grid. They were broadcasting their little play to someone. What does that mean? It means the mole isn't just in my organization, Adrian said. It's high up, high enough to access municipal infrastructure. A small sound, a scratching, came from the couch. Nora was awake. She wasn't crying. She sat up, looked at the 2 adults, and slid off the sofa. She went to the coffee table, found a notepad and a pen, and began to draw. She drew a circle, the Halcyon Regent Dome. She drew a small square on the side, the fake camera. She drew a line from the camera to the center of the dome. The spot he was standing. Then she drew a sound wave. The horn, Seabright Pier. She drew a plus sign, then an equals sign. She pointed to the spot in the center of the dome. The device was there, in the roof, the sound on the phone. It was a test to make sure the audio pickup was working before they... She didn't finish. Adrian studied the child's drawing. She's right. The mic I grabbed was the trigger, but the signal was coming from the pier, the device in the dome. It was the explosive. Tess heard a noise, a faint, metallic tick-tick. She froze. "Did you hear that?" Adrian was instantly alert, his hand moving inside his jacket. "Where? The air conditioning," Tess whispered, pointing at a vent near the ceiling. Adrian listened. The sound was tiny, rhythmic. He walked to a wall panel, his movements fluid, and tapped it. The system whirred and went silent. The tick-tick was gone. It was just the system settling, he said, his voice softer, trying to de-escalate. But Tess was already shaking, the sound, or the absence of it, having broken her control. "I cannot do this," she whispered, the words for herself. "These are not sounds I know. I don't know what is safe." He watched her for a long moment, then he left the room. Tess flinched, assuming he was done, that her weakness had made her a liability. He returned 2 minutes later with 3 mugs, hot cocoa. The rich, sweet smell of it filled the cold air. He had made it in the kitchen. Like a normal person, he handed one to Tess, one to Nora. "It's not..." He started, then stopped. "It'll help." Nora took a sip, her eyes closing. Tess wrapped her cold hands around the warm ceramic. Adrian walked to a chest in the corner and opened it. He pulled out a dark, heavy-knit wool sweater. It was simple, expensive, and smelled faintly of cedar and something citrusy, bergamot. He held it out to Tess. "My mother's," he said, his voice rough. This got me through a bad night once, after my father's funeral." Tess took it. It was soft and impossibly warm. She pulled it on over her thin server's uniform. The scent was calming. It was a gesture so profoundly, unexpectedly kind that it almost broke her. As she adjusted the sleeve, her fingers brushed his wrist. She saw it then, not an elaborate ink tattoo signifying a clan, but a thin, white scar that ran across the bones of his wrist. It was an old wound, clean and fine. "A container cutting knife," Adrian said, seeing her look. "I was 12, slipped opening a crate of pineapples. My father's lesson, never let your grip slip." "A childhood on the docks, not in a palace?" Tess looked up, meeting his dark, harbor water eyes. "Thank you for this." She held up her mug. "And for believing Nora. Most people don't. They think she's strange." "It's a portside instinct," Adrian replied, his gaze unwavering. "You learn to listen to the wind. You don't have to understand it. You just have to trust it. She was the wind." He was a man of shadows, a man who had nearly died, and he was comparing her daughter to the wind. From the harbor, a ship horn sounded. It was not the rhythmic, threatening pulse from the recording, but a long, low, mournful call, cutting through the night. It was a sound of departure, of movement. Tess looked at Adrian over the rim of her mug. He looked back. In the shared quiet, an unspoken decision was made. This was not a night for running. This was a night for turning to face the storm. The cocoa was gone, but the warmth of the heavy sweater remained. Dawn found Tess, Adrian, and Nora still in the penthouse, the adrenaline replaced by a gritty, determined exhaustion. The city below was waking up, its arteries filling with traffic, oblivious. They were a tiny island of conspiracy in the morning light. Adrian had the tablet. He had been replaying the audio file from Serafina, the one with the ship horn, listening to it over and over. "It is not just a recording," he said, his voice rough from the long night. "It is a map." Nora, sitting cross-legged on the floor, pointed at the screen. "It's a tide table code. Simple. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Simple, they are using minutes, Nora explained, her small finger tracing the sound wave. The first pause, 3 seconds, the second 2, 3 and 2, but it is not time. It is distance. She looked up at Adrian. My dad, my old dad, he was a surveyor for a while. He taught me maps. What if you change minutes to nautical miles 3 miles out, 2 miles over, from a fixed point? Seabright Pier, Adrian said, his fingers flying across the tablet, pulling up maritime charts. He mapped the coordinates Nora suggested. 3 miles out, 2 miles north. The cursor blinked. There is nothing there, he said, frowning. Just open water. No, Tess said, looking over his shoulder. She was thinking about her jobs, about the routes she took. You are using the new charts. The city decommissioned the old infrastructure. What was there? 10, 15 years ago, Adrian typed. Accessing older city archives, a new map loaded, overlaid with faded municipal lines. The cursor now blinked on a small, artificial island. Granite Point Waterworks, Tess read aloud. It was shut down after the sanitation budget cuts. Adrian nodded, a dark understanding settling on his face. And I know who manages the property on paper. It was part of a city services bundle, the UHTG. They have been sitting on it for a year. The ghost had a house. Adrian made another call, this time to a man named Lirio, his street-level acoustics expert. He played the audio file over the secure line. Clean the background. I do not care about the voices. I want the room tone. Everything behind the voices. He put the phone on speaker. For 10 minutes, they listened to static, hissing, and faint digital manipulation. Then, Lirio's voice returned. Got it. Behind the ship horn and the 60-cycle hum, there is a mechanical sound, very faint, a locking mechanism. Listen. A sharp, precise click-thwack echoed from the tablet speaker, a tumbler falling. That, Adrian said, his eyes narrowing, is a Juno Mark II, magnetic seal, high security. You cannot pick it. You can only get them from one supplier in the Netherlands. And they were almost impossible to find in the States. While he worked his network, Tess worked hers. She pulled out her own phone, a cheap, prepaid model, and dialed a number she knew by heart. Kaylee, it is Tess. I am okay, but I need a favor. A weird one. She spoke quietly, turning away from Adrian, a habit of self-preservation. Kaylee ran the Glass Harbor Collective, the underground network of women who helped each other. The same network that had found Tess her first apartment. I need a map, an old one. I need the original plumbing and water access blueprints for Granite Point Waterworks. There was a pause. Tess, what trouble are you in? The kind that needs a map. Kaylee, please. I will see what I can find in the city archives. Call me in 2 hours. As if summoned by the tension, Adrian's secure phone chimed with a new message. Serafina. It was not text. It was a single, high-resolution photograph. It was a close-up of a whiteboard, taken at a sharp angle, as if from a pocket. The writing was clear. At the top, OP bayonet. Below, a flow chart, Lucenti toast, UHTG signal, K9 live feed, controlled debt, blame Lucenti dock syndicate, seize assets. Tess felt cold. OP bayonet, K9, Channel 9. They were going to broadcast it live, frame you for a terrorist act at your own party. They needed me dead, Adrian said. And they needed a clean, public-facing reason to seize my port credentials. The UHTG saves the day from the failed bombing by the Mafia. Then Rook called. His voice was all business. Boss, I found your Juno locks, where, in your own house, metaphorically, our treasurer, Matteo Vance, authorized an irregular purchase 3 weeks ago, a dozen Juno Mark II high-security locks, paid for through a shell company, Hearthline Salvage. Matteo, the quiet, efficient man who managed Adrian's legitimate books, the one man Adrian thought was clean. A rat, Adrian said, the word like a stone. He is Doc Syndicate. I do not think so, Tess said, thinking aloud. Adrian turned to her, surprised. He does not fit. He's not hungry like them. He is something else. She had seen Mateo at company functions, always watching, always separate. "What do you suggest?" Adrian asked. "Do not send Rook," Tess said. "Do not send a threat. Send me." He stared at her. "Absolutely not. He will expect you. He will expect a gun." Tess argued, her voice gaining strength. "He will not expect a single mom from the catering staff. I will tell him I am here about a payroll error, something with my HR file. I will go to the office, talk to him. I will get him talking." She held up a thin device, disguised as a pen. "I have my own tools." The meeting was a piece of urban theater. Tess, looking pale and harried, clutching a sheaf of papers, was buzzed into Mateo Vance's sterile office. He looked up, annoyed. Then his face registered a vague, polite confusion. "Miss Calder, from the event staff, what can I do for you?" "I am so sorry to bother you. Mr. Vance," Tess said, pitching her voice with just the right amount of desperate, bureaucratic frustration. "It is about my back pay. They said there was a problem with my file, and you were the only one who could sign off." She clicked the pen. It began recording. Mateo sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Miss Calder, in case you have not noticed, the company is in a bit of a crisis." "I know, sir. It is just with what happened. I am scared, and I have my daughter." That word daughter seemed to land. Mateo looked at her, really looked at her, and his professional mask cracked. "You were there? With your child?" he asked, his voice dropping. "Yes, we saw it." Mateo Vance stood up, walked to the door, and locked it. He turned back, his face a mask of profound, abject failure. "He is not a rat," Tess said, a sudden, cold realization. "No," Mateo said, his voice hollow. "I am worse. I am a damn fool. I am not Doc's syndicate." He reached into his wallet and flipped open a badge. Federal Commerce Integrity Bureau, FCIB. Tess just stared. Another acronym. We are not real, Miss Calder, not officially," he confessed, the words tumbling out. "We were formed to investigate financial terrorism, the ports. We built the Urban Hazard Task Group as a sting operation, a honeypot, to see which rats would come sniffing." "But you caught a shark," Tess whispered. "We caught a leviathan," Mateo corrected. "Someone inside my own agency, someone who architected the entire fake bureau, hijacked the protocol, Harlan Price. He took my ghost and gave it real guns. He's using it to wipe the board clean, take the port for himself, all under the cover of a federal investigation that I created. He's running Serafina, holding her brother. I lost control. Miss Calder, I lost it all." Tess clicked the pen off. The enemy had a name, Harlan Price, the architect. And he was not just a ghost. He was the one pulling every string. Seabright Pier was not a place for civilians. It was a skeleton of rusting cranes and rotting pylons, a graveyard for ships. The wind came off the water with a sound like a low, pained moan, carrying the thick, metallic smell of salt and diesel. The only light came from a few flickering sodium lamps, casting a sickly orange glow that made the shadows seem to move. Adrian led the way, not a mafia boss in a suit, but a man of the docks, moving with a silent, predatory grace. Rook was his shadow, a heavy, quiet presence. And then there was Tess, her hand gripping Nora's so tightly her knuckles ached. She was here because there was nowhere else to go. Leaving Nora alone was not an option, and leaving Tess behind was no longer Adrian's plan. They moved along the lee of a stack of containers, the corrugated steel cold to the touch. "The Juno case is in this one," Adrian murmured, pointing to a dark red container marked with the logo of a defunct fruit company. "Hearthline Salvage, Mateo's shell. It's the only one not on the manifest." Crack! The sound was sharp, splitting the air. A millisecond later, the nearest sodium lamp overhead exploded in a shower of glass and sparks. The pier was plunged into near total darkness. "Sniper," Rook grunted, his voice calm, as if commenting on the weather. Tess's heart stopped. She didn't scream. She reacted. She grabbed Nora, pulling her down and rolling behind a massive wooden pallet, the rough wood splintering against her back. The air smelled of creosote and fear. "Mama," Nora whispered, her voice trembling. "Shh, baby, we're okay," Tess whispered back, her own heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She shielded her daughter's body with her own. "Breathe with me, just like we practice. Count. 1, 2, 3. She forced her own lungs to obey, to find a rhythm in the terror. A roar echoed across the pier as Rook fired up the engine of a dormant forklift. The machine sputtered to life, its heavy diesel engine a sudden, violent intrusion. He gunned it, driving the massive vehicle forward, its forks lowered, turning it into a mobile wall of solid steel. He parked it between them and the dark, unknown position of the sniper, creating a pocket of cover. "Stay here," Adrian ordered Tess, his voice a command that left no room for argument. He moved under the cover of the forklift, a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters in his hand. He pressed against the container seal. The snap of the metal breaking was shockingly loud in the sudden quiet. He wrenched the door open. "Tess, the light," he called out, his voice low. Tess fumbled in her pocket for the penlight he had given her. Her hand was shaking. She crawled to the edge of the pallet, pointing the thin, weak beam into the container. Adrian was already inside. He had a pair of work gloves on. He grabbed a heavy, metallic Juno-branded suitcase. "Give me your gloves," he snapped, his own hands occupied. Tess stripped off the wool gloves she was wearing and tossed them to him. He used them to wipe the case handle, then his own prints from the cutters. Before throwing the tools deep into the darkness, he opened the case. Inside, it was not gold, not drugs. It was a circuit board, a timer, and a block of military-grade explosive. "It is a cleanup kit," Adrian said, his voice lethal. "A setup. They were going to plant this. Blame my men for the UHTG signal, and find it after the fact." "Please do not shoot." The voice was high, terrified, cracking with adolescent fear. It came from the end of the pier. Rook and Adrian flattened against the container, guns appearing in their hands from nowhere. A figure stumbled into the faint moonlight, a boy, painfully thin. His hands raised, he had a black electronic collar around his neck, a single red light blinking on it. "Cade," Adrian hissed, recognizing him, Serafina's brother. He was a lure. They said to walk here. They said to wait." Cade stammered, tears streaming down his face. "They have my medicine." "He is a mule," Rook growled. "GPS collar. They are watching." But Tess was already moving. She stepped out from behind the pallet, her hands raised and empty. "Adrian, no," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "He is a child." She walked slowly toward the boy, her movements calm, non-threatening. "Cade, my name is Tess. I'm a friend of your sister's." The boy was shaking so hard he could barely stand. "They are watching." He sobbed. "I know," Tess said, her voice a warm, steady anchor in the cold. It was the voice she used for Nora's nightmares, the voice that promised, "I am here. I am in charge. You are safe. We are going to get that off you. It is okay. You are doing so good." She was 3 feet from him now. Rook moved up, a specialized tool in his hand. "You are Cade," Tess said, her voice slow and rhythmic, holding his gaze, blocking out the man with the cutter. "That is a strong name. Serafina talks about you. She's so proud of you. Now my friend Rook is just going to touch the back of your neck. It will not hurt. It will be very fast." Rook slipped the magnetic key. A Juno counter, under the collar. It clicked. He pulled it free. Cade let out a sound, a half sob, half gasp, and fell forward. For the first time, someone had spoken his name with kindness, not as a threat. "We are blown! Move!" Adrian ordered. "Spikes!" Rook tossed a strip of caltrops onto the access road as they heard the sound of an engine turning over in the distance. They were retreating. Rook, without ceremony, lifted the sobbing, grateful Cade and slung him over one broad shoulder. "Nora!" Tess called, and her daughter ran to her. "Hold his hand," Tess instructed, and Nora, without question, reached up and grabbed Cade's dangling fingers. "It is okay," Nora said, her voice a small echo of her mother's. "You just have to count to 3, then you stop being scared." They were almost to the Vesper when Adrian stopped. "The main drive. I left it." He turned to run back to the container. The sniper fired again, desperation making him reckless. The bullet screamed past Adrian's head, so close it made a zing in the air, grazing the shell of his ear. Tess did not think. She lunged. She crashed into his side with her full body weight, tackling him like a linebacker. They went down hard on the wet asphalt, a tangle of limbs. He landed with a grunt. The air knocked from his lungs, Tess half on top of him. "Are you insane?" she yelled, her face inches from his, her hands fisted in his jacket. He just looked at her. The rain, which had been threatening all night, began to fall. Cold and sudden, it plastered her hair to her face. She was terrified, furious and magnificent. His eyes, the color of the harbor in a storm, were not looking at a server. They were not looking at a victim he needed to protect. They were looking at the woman who had just saved his life, the person who had run toward the fight. Rook yanked the car door open. "Boss now!" Adrian pulled Tess to her feet. They scrambled into the car, the doors slamming shut. They sped off through a narrow service alley, the Vesper's tires kicking up a spray of water and leaving a plume of diesel smoke in the rain. The Palmetto safe house was not a fortress of glass and steel like the penthouse. It was an old, single-story house, built low to the ground, hidden deep within a humid grove of rustling palmetto trees. The rain, which had begun as they fled the pier, was now a steady, driving downpour, drumming on the metal roof, a sound that felt both isolating and protective. Rook had dropped them, confirmed the perimeter alarms were set, and then vanished back into the night, a ghost in his own right. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of cedar and old books. In the adjoining bedroom, a small, amber-colored nightlight glowed. Nora and Cade were asleep, Cade on a cot, Nora in the main bed. Tess had insisted on leaving the door cracked open. A narrow slice of light that was her lifeline to her daughter's breathing. Tess stood by the main window, watching the palmetto fronds bend and sway in the wind. The adrenaline from the pier, from tackling a Mafia boss, was finally ebbing, leaving a bone-deep chill and a fine, uncontrollable tremor in her hands. She was still wearing his mother's sweater. She heard him move in the small kitchen, the clink of ceramic. He came to stand beside her, not touching, just sharing the view of the storm. He held out a mug. "Ginger tea," he said. His voice was low, the roughness from the night still in it. "It's hot. It will help the shaking." She turned to take it, but her hands were trembling so badly she was afraid she would drop it. She started. "Let me," he said. He stepped closer, into the faint light from the kitchen. She saw that his hands were not clean. They were streaked with dark grease and engine oil, probably from the Vesper. The bullet had grazed his ear, and the skin was an angry red. Tess set her own mug down on the windowsill. She walked wordlessly to the small kitchen sink, turned on the tap until the water ran steaming hot and soaked a clean dish rag. She wrung it out, the heat stinging her palms. She walked back to him. He watched her, his eyes dark and unreadable. As she reached out, she did not ask for permission. She simply took his left hand in hers. It was calloused, hard, a map of a life she could not imagine. His hand rested in hers, unmoving, gently. She began to wipe away the oil and the grime, her movements slow and methodical. It was the first time they had touched without the world exploding around them. This simple, domestic act, cleaning the dirt from his skin, felt more intimate than the chaos, more real than the kiss he had not yet given. The rain hammered the roof. The distance between them, which had been a chasm of class and violence, had shrunk to the space of a warm, damp cloth. "I'm scared," she whispered, her voice so low it was almost lost in the storm. She did not stop her task. "I have spent 5 years being scared. I ran from my husband. I ran to Port Garrison. I ran from job to job, just trying to stay invisible." She finally looked up, her gaze meeting his. I don't want to run anymore." His free hand, the clean one, came up. He didn't touch her face. He didn't grab her. He slowly, deliberately, rested his forehead against hers. They stood like that for one long, shuddering beat. He was not taking. He was asking. It was a silent question, a pause that gave her all the power in the world. Tess let out a breath she felt she had been holding since she stepped off the bus in this city. She nodded. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. His lips met hers. It was not a kiss of demand. It was slow, a gesture of discovery. It was deep and sure, and it tasted of the ginger on her breath and the sea salt that still clung to his skin. He was testing, learning her, and she was learning him. Their breath mingled, a warm cloud in the cool air, and for a moment, the only sound in the world was the rain. He pulled back, just an inch, his eyes searching hers, then kissed her again. He wrapped his arms around her, one hand sliding to the small of her back, pressing her close. It was a gesture of holding, not of force. It grounded her. In response, her hands, one still holding the damp cloth, moved. She dropped the rag. Her hand slid up his chest, over his shoulders, to the back of his neck. His skin was hot beneath her palms. She felt the heavy, frantic pulse of his carotid artery drumming against her fingertips, a betraying sign of the calm he tried to project. They broke apart, but only by inches, their foreheads touching again. "I was going to leave," he breathed, the words a rough confession against her skin. "After the engagement, the merger, I was going to sell the port, take the clean money, and disappear. I thought I could buy my way out of being a Lucente. I left," she countered, her voice just as low, "so Nora could be safe, so she could grow up in a house where the only sounds were her own, where no one ever yelled." His mouth found hers again, and this time, the heat was immediate. The careful exploration was gone, replaced by a current of need, a flash of the man who commanded the docks and faced down snipers. It was an indulgent, passionate kiss, a claiming. And Tess, whose body had been a shield for 5 years, suddenly felt safe enough to be soft. She met his passion, her fingers tightening in his hair. She led, and he answered, respecting the lines she drew even as she invited him to blur them. His heavy jacket, still damp, slid from his shoulders and fell to the armchair, forgotten. He was a man of action, and his body was moving with purpose, his mouth leaving hers to trace a line along her jaw. A tiny creak echoed from the hallway. It was just the old house settling in the storm, but it was enough. They both froze. The narrow slice of amber light from the children's room was still visible. The door was still ajar. The quiet, even sound of Nora's breathing was a tangible thing in the room. Adrian pulled back instantly. Though he did not let her go, he looked at the sliver of light, then back at her. A slow, almost imperceptible laugh, a mere puff of air, escaped him. He pressed his forehead to hers one last time. "When this is safe," he murmured, his voice thick and raw with an emotion she hadn't heard before. "I'm asking you for a night without rain, a night where no doors are open." Tess closed her eyes, a small smile touching her lips. "I might say yes." He guided her to the worn sofa by the window. He sat and she settled against him, her head finding the natural place on his chest. He put one arm around her. She could hear his heart, a strong, steady rhythm under her ear, a counterpoint to the raging storm. Across the hall, she could hear Nora's breathing. That night, they did not move. They slept on the sofa, 2 survivors in a safe house, the storm breaking around them, their hands intertwined. The new Oceanic Museum was all glass and reclaimed wood beams, a statement of Port Garrison's clean future. It was the perfect stage for a public execution. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and catered scallops. This was not a party. It was a chessboard, and all the pieces were in place. Harlan Price, the architect of ghosts, was arrogant. He believed he was the only player. He had agreed to attend to publicly receive an award on behalf of his phantom UHTG for their bravery during the Halcyon Regent incident. He was coming to collect his prize, to cement his narrative in public. Backstage, in a concrete hallway that smelled of new paint, Tess stood with Serafina Cade, the woman who was, by all public accounts, Adrian's grieving and betrayed fiancé. Serafina's hands were steady, but her eyes were worn with a terror Tess recognized. "When this is done," Serafina said, her voice a low, urgent whisper, "Cade needs help. Real therapy, not a facility, but someone who understands what they did to him. I know a place," Tess said instantly, thinking of the Glass Harbor Collective. "I know good people. He will be safe." Serafina's shoulders, which had been rigid for months, slumped in relief. She reached out and gripped Tess's hand. "They made me a pawn. They thought because I was a woman I was just a prize. Tonight I set the fire. I will be right there with you." Tess promised. She meant it. This was not about Adrian anymore. This was about two women, two mothers in their own way, taking back the board. In a small security alcove, Adrian, Rook, and a deeply ashamed Mateo Vance were huddled. Mateo, the failed double agent, had come clean. "I'm sorry," Mateo said. "Not for the first time. I started this fire. I have to help you put it out." He slid a rolled blueprint across the table. "The schematics for Granite Point Waterworks. It is not just a building, it's a server farm. He is running his entire operation from the old pump room. This is the only way in that avoids his sensors." Adrian took the map without a word. He then looked at Tess, who had just rejoined them. He held out a simple, black smartphone. It was cold to the touch. "This is Kite," he said, his voice flat. "The network. When you press the center of this screen, it all goes public. The audio file of Serafina being threatened, the OP bayonet photo, Mateo's confession, the shipping manifests, everything. It will go to every phone within a 5-block radius, and a hard copy dump straight to the Port Tribune's servers." He was not giving this to Rook, his most trusted man. He was giving it to her. He was handing her the gun, the evidence, and the power to destroy him. All in one. "You will know when," he said. It was not a question. The gala was underway. Serafina, a vision in tragic, elegant black, walked to the podium. The room fell silent. She began her speech, her voice trembling, but not with fear, with rage. "We are a city of water," she began, her voice carrying over the speakers. "We live by the tide, but for too long, a darkness has lived in that water, an undertow of violence and corruption." She looked, not at the crowd, but at a specific, empty spot at the front. "We are told to fear the obvious, the men whose names are whispered on the docks, but the real threat wears a suit and a smile." Adrian stood in the back of the room. "A living target," Serafina continued, her voice rising. "We are told there are heroes among us, men who work in the shadows to guarantee our—" She paused, her eyes finding a man walking down the center aisle. Harlan Price, flanked by two men in dark suits, smiling, ready to accept his accolades. Public safety. That was the cue. Tess, standing by the bar, pressed her thumb to the center of the dark screen. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the room exploded, not with a bomb, but with sound. 100, then 500. Notification chimes. Bling, bling, bling. Every guest, every waiter, every journalist pulled out their phone. And there it was. The audio of Harlan Price's man threatening Serafina, the photo of the OP bayonet whiteboard, a scrolling list of offshore accounts tied to Hearthline Salvage. Harlan Price, his face ashen, froze on the spot. The smile was gone, replaced by the confusion of a predator caught in a snare. "What is this?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "It is the truth," Serafina said from the podium, her voice clear as a bell. Harlan's composure snapped. He pointed at Adrian. "This is a setup. A terrorist act. He is a known criminal. Arrest him for public safety. Arrest that man." His UHTG goons, who had been his honor guard, moved toward Adrian. "No." A small, clear voice said. It was Nora. She was standing by the secondary projector. the one meant to show a loop of beautiful Port Garrison. She had a small adapter in her hand, plugged into her own phone, and as Harlan yelled, Nora hit play. The main screen behind Serafina, which had been showing the chaotic data dump, suddenly changed. It was now a simple spreadsheet. 2 columns, Lucente Logistics, refrigerated containers, and Hearthline Salvage, projected. It showed the exact number of containers Adrian ran, and the exact, identical number that Harlan Price's shell company was set to take over. It was the motive, the profit, the checkmate. A collective gasp came from the crowd. Harlan Price knew he was done. Lights, he screamed. The ballroom was plunged into total darkness. In the confusion, a single shot was fired. High, into the ceiling, a warning. Doc Syndicate, someone yelled. They are covering his escape. Price was not working against the syndicate. He was their new partner. When the emergency lights flickered on, Harlan Price and his men were gone. Adrian stood untouched, a thin, cold smile on his face. He watched the empty doorway through which Price had fled. Go, he whispered to the empty space. Run to the one place I know you will be. See you at the place I chose. Price. Amid the chaos, Serafina Cade walked off the stage. She did not go to Adrian. She went to the side room where Cade was waiting, and she hugged her brother, a free woman. Tess looked at Adrian and then at the map in his pocket. The final move was not here. The final move was at Granite Point Waterworks. Every string, every lie, every ghost was waiting for them at the water. The victory at the museum felt hollow. It was a battle won, but the war was now defined, and the enemy was cornered. A cornered animal is the most dangerous. They were back at the Palmetto safe house, the air thick with unspoken dread. The rain had stopped, but the humidity remained, a heavy blanket. He knows we know where he is, Adrian said, his voice flat. He was staring at the Granite Point blueprints. He'll be waiting. He will expect me to come in hard. He looked up, and his gaze was heavy. He also knows you and Nora are with me. He knows where to cut. Tess felt the blood drain from her face. Before we finish this, Adrian continued, his voice softer but no less firm, Nora has to be safe, not just hidden. She needs to be off the board entirely. Where, Tess whispered, though she already knew. The one place I can't reach, and the one place he wouldn't think to look. Adrian said, your network, the Glass Harbor Collective. Tess's whole body recoiled. To be separated from Nora, it was the one thing she had vowed would never happen again, to hand her daughter over to anyone. Even the women who had saved her felt like a betrayal. But she looked at the blueprints, at the cold, hard lines of Adrian's face, and she knew he was right. This last fight, the one at the waterworks, was not a place for a child. She nodded, a single, sharp jerk of her head. I will take her. Now. The goodbye was a tear in her soul. It happened on a quiet, tree-lined street in a part of town she barely knew. Kaylee met them, her face kind but serious. We will keep her, Kaylee promised, her eyes on Tess. She will be one of our own. Tess knelt, pulling Nora into an embrace so tight it ached. She buried her face in her daughter's hair, breathing in the scent of her, trying to memorize it. You have to be so brave, baby, Tess whispered, her voice breaking. Just for a little while. Nora, her small face pale but resolute, did not cry. She simply put her small hands on Tess's cheeks. It is okay. Mama, you count to 3 when you miss me too much. That is all. She pulled back and took Kaylee's hand. She did not look back. Tess stood on the sidewalk until the green door closed, and a piece of her went with it. She returned to the Palmetto as a ghost. The house, once a warm refuge, was now just an empty, silent room. Adrian was waiting. He had not moved. He watched her as she stood by the door, hollowed out. Her purpose for the last 11 years now safely behind a green door. She was untethered. He did not cross the room to comfort her. He did not touch her. Instead, he did something far more profound. He reached into his pocket and placed a key on the small table by the door. It was the key to his penthouse, the one with the kinetic locks. That is the safest place in the city, he said, his voice level. You can go there, or you can go anywhere else. Kaylee can help. You are free, Tess. He was giving her the choice. Stay or go. He was not assuming ownership. He was not claiming her because of the night they had shared. He was giving her back the one thing her ex-husband and the world had tried to take her agency. Tess looked at the key. She looked at the man. She thought of Nora's small, brave face. Running was easy. Staying was hard. She walked past the key, sat on the sofa, and picked up the second copy of the Granite Point blueprints. "I am staying," she said. It was not a promise. It was a fact. Not for him, not out of debt, but because she was now on the same side, facing the same direction. The next hour was a cascade of failures. The darkness before the dawn, the secure phone rang. It was one of Rook's men. "Rook's down," the man said, his voice strained. He was checking a secondary location, a storage unit tied to Hearthline. "Truck bomb. He's alive, but he's not in fighting shape. Harlan is cleaning house." A muscle in Adrian's jaw twitched. One bishop off the board, then the secure laptop pinged, an email from Mateo Vance's account. It was blank. "He's dark," Adrian said, closing the laptop. "Either he's caught or he's deep in a hole." The inside man was gone. "Kite is reporting nothing." Adrian continued, his frustration a palpable force. "Harlan has scrubbed every server, every back channel. He's pulled all his tendrils back. There is nothing left of the UHTG or the FCIB. There is only Granite Point. He's built his fortress, and he is inviting us to storm the walls." As if summoned, a new message arrived. This one was forwarded from Serafina. It was an official-looking email from the Port Garrison District Attorney's Office, requesting her immediate testimony in a sealed witness deposition, the location Granite Point Waterworks. "It is a trap," Tess said, stating the obvious. "Of course it is," Adrian said, a cold, familiar fire entering his eyes. "He's collecting his pieces. He needs his hostage back." He stood, the old Lucente energy returning, the calculated violence. "We will do the trade. He wants me. He can have me. Rook's men will set up a perimeter." "No." Adrian stopped. "What?" "No," Tess said, standing. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "Look what that got us. Look what it did to Cade. We are done using family as bait. We are done trading people." "It is the only move, Tess." "No, it is the old move," she argued, her own anger rising. "It is what he expects. You go in there, and he kills you. He kills Serafina, and he wins. You want to beat a man like Harlan Price. You do not attack his fortress. You attack his pride." He was listening. The anger in his eyes was replaced by a sharp, sudden focus. "He thinks he is a ghost," Tess said, pacing. "He thinks he is invisible, smarter than everyone. So we make him visible. We call him out, not with guns, with light." She pointed to the Kite Network phone. "We send a message, not to the Tribune, to him, a direct challenge. You and him, one-on-one. We set the time, tonight, and we broadcast the challenge live. If he does not show up, if he hides in his little pump room, the entire city, the entire network, sees him for what he is, a coward hiding behind fake badges." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Adrian's face. He picked up the Kite phone. He recorded a message, his voice cold and clear. "Harlan, you made this a public game. Let us finish it, you and me. Midnight, Granite Point, just us. The city is watching." He sent it. 30 seconds later, the phone pinged, a reply from an unknown, encrypted number. It was not text. It was a single, black icon, and hourglass. Adrian looked at Tess. The trust between them was absolute. "Get your coat," he said. "We have a deadline." Granite Point Waterworks was a cathedral of rust. The air inside the vast, derelict facility was thick with the smell of decay and stagnant water. A fine, dusty rain fell from the rotting ceiling, filtering down through the steel catwalks. It was cold. Every sound a drop of water. The scrape of a shoe echoed back a dozen times from the empty, cavernous holding tanks. Harlan Price stood in the center of the main pump room, flanked by 6 men in unmarked, tactical gear. They were his UHTG, an army with no flag. He had set up his own stage, a bank of portable screens, all showing a live, proprietary feed. "You are late, Lucente." Harlan's voice boomed, artificially amplified. He was a small man, made large by his own technology. "And you brought a guest. Unwise." He motioned to his live stream. "But just in time. The city of Port Garrison is about to witness your attempt to sabotage the municipal water supply, a truly desperate act of terrorism." Tess stood beside Adrian. She wore a soft, flexible vest under her jacket. It was not armor, but it was a promise. "We are not here to fight you, Harlan," Adrian said, his voice calm, carrying naturally in the echoing space. "We are here to show them the truth." On the perimeter, hidden in the scrub outside, Serafina and Cade controlled a small, quiet drone, its feed patched directly into the kite network. The pact was clear: do not fire first. Expose. Harlan laughed. "Truth." He gestured to his main screen. A video began to play. It was skillfully edited footage from the Halcyon. Audio of Adrian's men discussing shipments, all layered to look like a conspiracy. "This is the truth. My men stopped your bomb at the gala, and now you are here to finish the job." Tess stepped forward, holding the kite phone. "You're right, Harlan. Let us look at the evidence. We are streaming too. To everyone." She hit a button. Her own feed, the real feed, went live, challenging Harlan's. "This is the original audio file," she announced, her voice steady. "The one your man used to threaten Serafina Cade." She played it. The tinny sound of the man's voice filled the chamber, followed by the faint click-thwack of the Juno Mark II lock. "That is your acoustic fingerprint, Harlan," Tess said. "The sound of a Juno lock, bought by your shell company. It appears at exactly 2 minutes and 17 seconds. On the screens, a chat window from the public kite stream exploded. "We hear it, he's right there." The Juno file. Harlan's face went white, and he had lost the narrative. "You pathetic!" he snarled, his mask of bureaucratic civility vanishing. He was no longer a ghost. He was just a man, cornered. "You think this was just about a frame-up?" He pulled a heavy-duty detonator from his belt. "This is a public health crisis. The pipes are unstable." He pointed at a massive rust-green tank in the corner, marked with a faded hazmat symbol. "Chlorine," Adrian breathed, understanding. "The old, unstable reserve tank. When this goes," Harlan screamed, "the gas hits the main conduit. A disaster that Mr. Lucente caused my UHTG will secure the site, and the city will be begging me to take over the port." He aimed the detonator. Adrian did not hesitate. He did not go for his gun. He ran. He sprinted toward the manual valve room, a small, caged-off area. Tess, the crossflow. Tess was right behind him. She had grabbed a heavy, discarded pipe wrench from the floor. As Adrian wrestled with the main wheel, trying to lock the flow from the chlorine tank, Tess saw the secondary valve, the backup. She jammed the wrench into its gears, locking it, preventing the override. Harlan was faster. He bared his teeth, raised a pistol, and fired. The shot was deafening. Adrian shoved Tess to the concrete floor, taking the bullet himself. It ripped through the flesh of his shoulder. A hot, searing pain. He collapsed on top of her, shielding her, blood already seeping into his shirt. Harlan raised his pistol for the finishing shot, but Tess, her face pressed to the grimy floor, saw a security camera on the wall, its red light blinking. With a surge of desperate strength, she reached up, ripped the battery pack from its housing, and jammed the exposed wires into the port on her phone. The kite stream instantly hijacked the camera's feed. The entire city, the Port Tribune, everyone watching was now seeing a high-definition, close-up shot of Harlan Price aiming a gun at an unarmed man and a woman, with a chlorine tank at his back. Harlan's men, seeing the feed, seeing their faces broadcast, faltered. Their fantasy of being federal agents vanished. They were just criminals. They scattered. "We have a breach," a voice yelled from a dark, auxiliary pipe. Mateo Vance, covered in grime, emerged, his service weapon drawn. He tackled Harlan, slamming him to the ground, and snapped cuffs on his wrists. "It is over!" "Price," Mateo yelled. Not yet, Harlan shrieked. His face contorted. He slammed his cuffed hand onto a secondary timer wired to his vest. A small, red light began to blink on the chlorine tank. A backup, you have 2 minutes. Adrian, bleeding, pushed himself up. He saw the blinking light. He saw Harlan cuffed and laughing. He pulled his own gun from his ankle holster and pressed the muzzle to Harlan's temple. This was the old way, the Lucenti way, an eye for an eye. Adrian, no. Tess grabbed his arm, her grip desperate. He looked at her, his eyes dark with a lifetime of violence. We end this with the truth, she said, her voice shaking but firm, not with darkness, not his way. For one agonizing second, he held the pose. Then he let out a breath. He dropped the gun. He chose her. Rook, a voice croaked. Rook, his arm in a makeshift sling, his face bruised, stumbled into the room. He looked little better than broken. Heard the party was here. That's a primer-fed mine. The emergency flush, Adrian yelled, seeing it. A large, red handle. Together, the three of them, Adrian pushing with his good shoulder. Tess using her full body weight. Rook grunting in pain threw their combined weight onto the handle. With a groan of tortured metal, the emergency valve opened. A torrent of cold, clean water flooded the basin, surging over the primer, drowning the blinking red light. The mine was lit. The main doors burst open, flooding the room with light, not red and blue, but the bright white of news cameras. The Vigilant Bureau of City Safety, the real. Civilian oversight poured in, followed by journalists. The knot was undone. Harlan Price, soaking wet and cuffed, was arrested in front of 10,000 live-streaming viewers. The UHTG, a ghost built of lies, evaporated in the sudden, cleansing light. The harbor of Port Garrison was, for the first time in a century, breathing clean air. The fog that rolled in was just water, no longer thick with secrets or fear. Several months had passed, where the rusted shell of a Lucenti warehouse once stood. There was now the Maria Lucenti Community Center, a building of bright glass and open doors, named for the mother he had barely known. Serafina Cade ran it, not as a socialite, but as a survivor. Her first act was to establish a fund, using her own broken engagement settlement, to provide real, quiet therapy for those who had been coerced, her brother Cade being the first beneficiary. Cade, it turned out, had an ear for patterns, and he was now interning at the city's broadcast studio, learning to be a sound engineer. Nora, no longer a ghost in the shadows of a party, had joined the community center's robotics club. She was teaching the other children how to read the wind, a game she had invented. It was just a way to teach them to stop, listen, and count to 3 to calm their minds before making a decision. Mateo Vance, having turned state's evidence, left the shadows of his phantom agency and became the lead ethics advisor for the newly empowered Vigilant Bureau of City Safety, and Rook, fully recovered, now spent his Tuesday nights teaching a defensive driving course to the women of the Glass Harbor Collective. He had, improbably, found his calling as a teacher. And Adrian, he was still a man of the docks, but the docks were changing. He had pushed the majority of his assets into clean, transparent logistics. The gray elements, the parts of his empire that ran on shadow and rumor, were consolidated and placed under a new community oversight board. He was learning, day by day, the unfamiliar, tedious work of signing paperwork instead of signing orders. The evening was quiet. They now lived in an old brick house on the bay, a place with a garden, a place that felt solid and real. Tess stood on the balcony, leaning back against Adrian's chest. The air was cool. He had his arms around her, and she was wearing his mother's old wool sweater. The faint, comforting scent of bergamot was still there. "It's quiet," she murmured, resting her head in the space on his chest, right below his healed shoulder. "Just the tide," he said, his voice a low rumble against her ear. She turned in his arms to face him. The past few months had been a slow, patient discovery, learning the man who existed outside the storm. He had waited. He had given her space. He had let her rebuild the walls of her life, not as defenses, but as a home. He looked at her, his dark eyes no longer stormy, just deep. He lowered his head, And the kiss was slow, patient, and full of unspoken promises. It was a kiss that had waited, that had earned its place. It was not the desperate grab in the rain, but the sure, steady warmth of a hearth. He pulled back, just an inch. "I promised you a night without rain." He slid one arm under her legs and lifted her. She was light and she laughed, a sound that was still new to both of them. He carried her across the threshold of their bedroom. He set her down gently. "You okay?" he whispered, his hands framing her face. Tess smiled. She nodded. "I'm safe," she whispered. He kissed her again, his hands tracing the line of her jaw, his touch slow and deliberate, a question. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt, an answer. The lights were low. The door clicked softly shut. The camera did not follow, but in the quiet, there was only the sound of two people breathing in sync, the whisper of, "I am safe, you are safe," and the slow, sure knowledge of a boundary, finally, peacefully, erased. The next morning, the peace was shattered by a determined, rapid knocking. "Pancakes, you promised pancakes. I am counting to 3, Nora's voice yelled from the hallway. Tess woke first, tangled in sheets, her body warm and slow. She looked at Adrian asleep beside her, a peacefulness on his face she had never seen. She smiled, pulling on a robe. When she got to the kitchen, she found Adrian already there. He was wearing an apron, a ridiculous, bright yellow apron, and he was covered in flour. He was holding a spatula in one hand and a carton of eggs in the other, looking utterly, hopelessly lost. The instructions were unclear, he said. With the gravity of a man defusing a bomb, Tess leaned against the doorframe, her heart so full it ached. She crossed the room, took the eggs from his hand, and kissed the flour off his nose. "Okay, boss," she murmured. "Let's see what we're working with." Nora came in, and the 3 of them stood by the stove. "It's ready to flip," Nora announced. "Okay," Tess said, looking at her new, strange, beautiful family. "On my mark, a new tradition." She, Adrian, and Nora, all together, said it 1, 2, 3. Adrian flipped the pancake. It was, of course, a disaster, and it was perfect. A week later, the garden was full. Serafina was there, and Cade. Rook was arguing with Mateo about grill temperatures. Kaylee was laughing with a group from the collective. Adrian did not tap a glass. He did not ask for silence. He just stood next to Tess in the afternoon sun. He did not kneel. He stood level with her, eye to eye, the way they had stood from the beginning. He held out his hand. In his palm was a simple, vintage-style house key, and next to it, a simple, thin gold ring. "I cannot promise you a paradise that is free of salt," he said, his voice quiet but carrying. "I cannot promise you that the storms will not come, but I promise you, I will be the harbor. I will be the safe port when the wind blows." He offered the key. "This is your house, as much as it is mine." He offered the ring. "If you will have me." Tess was not crying. Her eyes were just bright as the bay. She took the key. She took the ring. "Yes," she said. She kissed him, a deep, public, joyful kiss. A cheer went up from the garden, and above it all, Nora's voice, clear as a bell. "Count to 3, she yelled. The whole garden, Rook, Serafina, Mateo, all of them counted. 1, 2, 3. Tess and Adrian broke the kiss, laughing, and the camera pulled back. It rose above the small brick house, above the garden full of laughter, and turned toward the bay. The sun was setting on Port Garrison. In the distance, a ship horn sounded, a long, low, single note, not a warning, a blessing, a journey, finally home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know your thoughts. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please share it in the comments. Subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Story, for more. And if you enjoyed this, please like the video and give it a special boost by hitting the hype button. It helps get this story out to more listeners.